Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following. Welcome to Full Bloom, the award-winning show that celebrates life. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Full Bloom. I'm Zita Christian. If you're like me, you love movies. I love movies. And tonight, we're going to talk about making movies. We're going to get a little bit of an inside scoop about making movies, particularly about the pre-production phase of making movies. My guest is a Connecticut filmmaker, Alexander Andriulli. Alexander, thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I know you can't pick up a newspaper lately here in Connecticut or even listen to some of the talk shows on the radio, and people are talking about film and Connecticut. So my question to you is, well, let me backtrack a minute. I hear pros and cons.
Sure.
I hear, yes, film is growing, everybody is interested, and then I hear some people go, well, they're interested, but nothing's really going to happen. So tell me, what's your perception of film and whether or not and how far and how fast it's growing in Connecticut?
Yeah, what is that we share our unions with New York. So anybody that's doing production work is working mostly in New York and doing some work in Connecticut unless they're doing commercial work. There's not a lot of major feature films happening here, and it's just perception. It's not that the talent isn't here, it's just the talent isn't working here. The majority of the people that are trained as an actor or technical crew or director or producer are working elsewhere but maybe living here, or maybe eventually when they make their first project they eventually move away because there's not consistent work in film. So the talent is here, it's just more about providing information, giving them the resources they need and letting them see that there's a lot that can be done here to inspire future filmmakers or people that are looking to get into the industry, and making it a lot easier for them to make their work.
Are you confident that in, let's say, 10 years from now, there will be more films, more major films being made in Connecticut, and that the environment for the making of indie films, do you see that getting better?
Well, it's all about education. I think a lot of the independent filmmakers right now are going towards self-distribution because it's difficult to make revenue going through an outside distributor, because typically the distributors are from Los Angeles that most independents get themselves picked up with when they hit the film festival circuit. And it's very difficult to make revenue because the way they model their business is that they will scoop up a lot of projects for nothing up front, giving the filmmaker nothing up front, and then after they sell a certain number of DVDs, they'll make a percentage per DVD sold. But it's kind of in the distributor's business model that they will, they know they're not going to sell over a certain number of DVDs, so they'll never have to really pay out the filmmaker.
Oh.
So it's a good thing for the filmmaker, because then you can go forward and say, my work has been distributed, would you like to invest into my next project? But it's just not a solid business model where they're actually generating revenue. So the smarter way is to look at outside ways to distribute yourself, build up your audience, and that's where a lot of the other things that I'm doing out there is giving them information on how to market themselves within their budget.
All right, let's talk about some of the films you've worked on and the various capacities.
So I started off on a film called Fight Ring. It was an ultra-low-budget independent film, like a underground fighting tournament, that was written and directed by Sean Gallimore, who's a former illustrator from Disney. He worked on Lion King, Hunchback of Notre Dame, a bunch of big productions as an illustrator.
I want to stop you just one second. You said an ultra-low budget. What frame that for me?
I think typically it's under $200,000 is an ultra low budget.
Okay.
So that you can, if you wanted to get your SAG waiver and go under the ultra low budget.
And SAG, Screen Actors Guild.
You can hire, but it was all non-union for the project.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So you had this particular movie, Fight Ring.
Yeah.
And your capacity with that?
I was a director of photography.
Okay. And was that you started off at that
Yeah,
capacity?
I just finished my graphic design degree and was starting to take some classes in broadcasting, and I bumped into an actor, Jason Coulis, who was part of an acting troupe They would go and do improv comedy called Off the Cuff. And he was recently hired on to work on this film Fight Ring, and I happen to have the same rig, the same camera that the director had. And so they were looking for a second camera op originally. And I met with Sean Gallimore up in Guilford and shot a commercial with him for a Hapkido studio because he was a martial artist as well. And he enjoyed my work and working with me, so he hired me as the director of photography. But since it was in India, I got to be very diverse with the production. I got to work with camera, lighting, sound, effects.
Nice.
I did some extra work in there as well. And so it was a really fun project, and that's the benefit of indies, that you can cross that line. You don't have to be stuck in one department. You can experiment and learn other departments. Whereas in union, it's very stringent.
On my questions, I was going to ask you if that idea of learning various jobs, the cross training, is a good way to learn, the industry, or is it so diverse that you never get anywhere? But it seems to me that it must be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, my approach has been the same approach since I was 5 years old. Is when I want to know what sometimes something works, I take it apart and I figure out how it works.
Okay.
And so that's that's my approach to film. Is I've learned a little bit of everything on set, from pre-production to post-production, technical, acting, everything, so that I have a broader sense of how things work from the art, from the creative and technical aspects, but also I'm learned about the business aspects of things as well, because having a better full picture of what you're getting involved in makes it easier for you to try to fix the things that aren't working, and working on other people's projects and learning where they faltered. This is now where you're going to succeed going forward.
Yeah, because you're paying attention to what other people have done. Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. So after Fight Ring, what was the next film?
After working on that film, I got to work on a much bigger budgeted project called Being Michael Madsen. The sister of director Mike Mangela was taking classes with me with broadcasting classes with me over in Middletown. And she said they were looking for a production assistant, and I went from a DP and an even a very ultra low budget film to a much bigger budgeted film with A-list Hollywood actors as a production assistant.
DP,
A director of photography, and
okay.
I went to production assistant for Being Michael Madsen, which I didn't see as downgrading my position. It's just I got to learn more because you had more expensive equipment. It was more formal.
Yeah, and you're broadening your knowledge base.
By broadening my knowledge, and they had Daryl Hannah, David Carradine, Debbie Rochon, Paige Davis, Michael Madsen, Virginia Madsen in this film. Mm-hmm. So getting to work with A-list actors on a highly technical film with an amazing cast ended up getting me a lot more work down the line, because I made friends with the DP and got to expand my list of people I could work with.
The networking is so important. I mean, in any field, it's important. So after Being Michael Madsen, Marathon?
No, after Being Michael Madsen, I ended up, I really didn't know anybody. I wasn't Facebooking. I was not on Facebook. I wasn't connected into the networks out there. I didn't know anybody. So I really had no way other than getting paid production assistant work through Jeff Hoyt, the DP of Michael Madsen. I couldn't find any other work in trying to expand my horizons and learn more. So I met Neil Thomason at at the time it was called the New Haven Underground Film Fest. There was the Underground Film Fest, and there was New Haven Film Fest, and they ended up merging into the New Haven Underground Film Fest, which was no longer in New Haven. It was in Meriden. Uh-huh. And I met Neil Thomason there, and him and his wife were there, and he needed a photographer, and I had my camera there, and I was just taking pictures for fun. And he hired me as a photographer on the second annual Film Industry Mixer. And as soon as I walked into the doors, there were hundreds of filmmakers from not just Connecticut, from New York and Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Nice. And I just got opened up to this whole new world. So I spent the next 6 months chasing him down, saying, I want to help. How can I help you out? I love this. This is a great way for me to meet people and to learn. And so I ended up being an assistant director for the third annual Mixer, and now I'm co-directing and co-producing. And then through, I think it was the fourth annual Mixer, I met Richard Hartize, who was the writer of the Marathon book. And then he hired my girlfriend and I on the production. She was production designer, and I got hired originally as a set photographer, but ended up becoming the associate producer for the production.
Oh, well, this networking then clearly works. Very beneficial. Well, obviously you have to have the talent and the knowledge to back it up.
Sure, sure.
Okay. So when is know if dates have been set yet for 2011 or 12
For the mixer?
For the mixer?
We're looking at doing something possibly at Yale, or we're kind of looking around at various locations. We did a meet and greet. We may do another one this year. Neil's having a baby in August, so
Oh, nice.
so we're probably not going to be doing another one this year. And if we do, it might be a very, very small
But
event.
people can get in touch with you. We'll have your website.
I have the East Coast Indie site, which is kind of an umbrella for my new organization, East Coast Independent Film, or East Coast Indie is what I'm calling it now. And that's like a nonprofit organization or not-for-profit organization that helps give resources to people and other projects that I have involved with that.
And that's fairly new.
That's very new. I started that back in December of last year.
And is that a membership organization? How does that work?
What it is you can join on the website if you want to be part of that network. And so what the original idea was, when I wanted to do something in a film industry mixer, but that's an event, it's not an organization. So I started an organization to do some of these things that would help generate revenue and additional resources for filmmakers. So the first project I started was a free college tour for independent films. What I see is a lot of independent films with A-list actors here, just amazing story, just phenomenal films, but they're not making money at all, or not making money hand over fist where they can continue to make films. Like the typical director or writer around here in Connecticut who's making a feature-length films, they only make a film every couple of years. Every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years, they're making a movie because they can't. It's harder to find just investors, especially when you're not making a big return. So if that's the track record of Connecticut filmmakers, investors are not as interested. But they're amazing films. Like A.D. Calpo's films are on Showtime, and they're all over the place, and they're just amazing projects. And he's getting some really great, amazing A-list talent involved in his films. And so the concept is to put them through this college tour for free, and to help them build upwards of 1 million fans on Facebook, which would directly translate to revenue for them, so that then they can now either self-distribute or just make money so they can continue to make more projects.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing this as a far more complicated a process than I had any idea, but it's really nice to know that an individual can take hold of some aspect of this and say, okay, with some imagination and support of other people who have like-minded interests, something can grow, and who knows where things will be a few years from now. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Diamond Rough, only because I know you're working on that, and Joe Young is associated with that. He's been on the show a couple times. We've talked about his animation work, and also the book when the book came out, Diamond Rough. So what's your capacity?
I'm one of the producers on the project.
Okay.
I'm basically helping them organize the project. I'm helping with any aspect that needs it. Once again, since we're both union and non-union, I can cross the line and do a lot of different things. So I'm helping with locations, helping with actors, helping with technical team, bringing a lot of technical team to the production. Jeanette Drake is who's my fiance now, and she's the production designer on the feature, and she's hiring a lot of UConn people. I'm hiring a lot of people from the film industry training program, a lot of local cast and crew and actors, and so it's just a wonderful project that I really love their company because they have the nonprofit side and the for-profit side, and as they grow as a company, they're continuing to give back. And when this film becomes successful, I'm not going to say if because I know with all the business planning that Joe has been putting into it, when it becomes successful, it will set a precedence for other investors and other projects outside of the state to come here and do 100% of their film here, because we have such a variety of locations, from city to rural to farmland to suburbs. There's just such a wealth of locations in Connecticut, and with the tax incentive program, and Rhode Island has theirs, and Mass has theirs. They could even do a half and half and really mix it up with their locations. But we're very willing to work with people, and with Diamond Rough, we have the full support of the state of Connecticut from every office, and it's just an amazing project. I can't.
Well, something you said just a moment ago, I want to explore a little more, and this whole idea of pre-production. You mentioned location, and certainly we have got a lot of topography and a lot of different locales here in Connecticut. But when you are in pre-production, talk to me about the main aspects that you would consider? Something that, like your decisions that you make now are going to have an effect far down the line in
Sure.
in the show. So what kind of decisions are you making now in the beginning?
What I do is someone brings me a script, I look at it, and I try to envision it as a completed project in my head. I can imagine it, and so, when I'm working with various people, some people write very cinematically. Like Peter Fox writes very cinematically, so when I read his work, it's very easy for me to be able to envision where it's going and see exactly where he came from. So if the piece is great on its own, it doesn't really need any work, that my work is done. I can just fill in the blanks for everything that I'm envisioning there and work with an art department person can see it as well. But when a project really needs to find a specific audience, I talk to the writer and I say, where do you want this to go? Do you want this to be a web series? Do you want this to be television, feature film? What do you want it in short, long form? What do you want to do with this? And depending on the format that we're going it for, I will put in some commercial elements in there or look at it and try to bring out some commercial elements that I think will help it in the long run based on current trends.
So like what kind of commercial elements?
Well, like there's, you have your seasons where the romantic comedies come out and where the action films come out and your tentpole season where, the major blockbusters come out and your horror comes out in the fall. And, so you kind of look at that and then see what's doing well. What kind of, film in that kind of genre is doing well? Are zombie movies doing well? Are vampire movies doing well? What's doing well in the market? And so does this film fit into any of those niches? So the film I'm doing right now, Walls of Remedy, that I'm doing in October with director Reno Venturi of the Actors Gym and writer Alison Monastero, is we're doing a romantic comedy. And it's a lesbian romantic comedy. It's about lesbian characters, and you have straight couples and gay couples, and it's about relationships. And we break it down into that. So we looked at it and about how people are going to perceive it. And if you can remove the gay, the straight, whatever, as far as people, being focused on that, and just make it about relationships, and that makes it a lot more universal, where people can really understand it and take away their preconceptions of whatever, or something, that knowledge that they don't understand the gay side of things, or they don't understand the straight side of things. Remove all of that out of the way, and then make something that's just a good story.
A good story,
Yeah.
absolutely. If you're just joining us now, you are watching Full Bloom, and I'm talking with Alexander Andriulli, who is a filmmaker in Connecticut, and the whole process is fascinating. But a little bit more here about the all of this pre-production. I want to talk a little bit more, go back to the idea of location. Based on what we have here in Connecticut, we don't have the Rocky Mountains, we don't have the North Pole, or we don't have the Pacific Coast, but based on the kind of things that we do have, what do you look at in Connecticut and say, this would be good for, well, I don't know if that's how it works. How do you match, here's the script, and here's the locations in Connecticut?
The locations are pretty much right there on the paper. And so you just try to find something in Connecticut that matches that. If you want to use Connecticut 100%, you can go out of the state for a few locations if you want to find something specific, but you have Gillette Castle, and you have all these just beautiful, vistas and bodies of water and land and cityscapes and all that. You can look at New Haven, and you can replace that for New York easily, or Hartford, depending on how you shoot it. Like the beauty with shooting a film is that, especially when it goes international, most people haven't been to, let's say, New York. So you can shoot any street for New York, just change the street signs, and depending on how the corner looks, and nobody unless they're a New Yorker is going to notice. And that's one demographic. That's one group of people globally that's going to notice. That's not New York. I know that. Everybody else hasn't. Most people haven't been there, so they're not going to know.
And unless you're saying that you're doing a documentary, most people just want a good story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even with a documentary, there's always things where you're switching out locations, and then unless it's it's an iconic place that they're going to be able to Google and say, I know where that is.
What about casting? You make decisions early on. What kind of decisions do you make in terms of the cast?
As far as the cast goes, I mean, you have to look at the part, and it's good when you don't have to have those barriers as far as union or non-union. When you can do both, and you have your union waiver, if you're working on the lower budgets, because there's not a lot of $1 million+ films that are 100% shot here. in Connecticut. So my perspective is always it's the best person for the part, whether we go to New York casting or if we go through Rena Venturi, who does the Actors Gym, and he's got lots of resources of actors here in Connecticut.
But I guess my question is, how do you decide what to look for? And when you
Sure.
in your mind and you say, I want the best person for the role, what are the factors in your mind that constitute the best?
You don't really put barriers or preconceptions in your head because that's going to get in the way. So when you do your casting call, you leave it pretty open. You know, you may have specific, you know, races or backgrounds or religions or whatever you're looking for, so that maybe they have a little bit of knowledge of that particular, you know, background for that particular background. But other than that, you leave it open because you could switch a role, you could switch a race, switch a religion, switch a background, male, female, all that stuff's interchangeable. When you see somebody read, and all of a sudden you get an idea of how that person may work for that role in a better light. So you just kind of leave yourself as a blank canvas and let the performers perform, make your notes during the casting call, and then start to, you know, discuss it with your other team and say, okay, what do you think about this person as that? And here's my idea of why I like this person. You give them your own personal opinion, but then you let things fall where they may.
Mm-hmm. How much of a role does psychology play when you're looking to cast?
Casting, I mean, a good actor will be able to connect, and there's a very psychological thing about that. They're looking at the camera like a person, like they're looking at somebody's soul. They're like looking through the lens, and they're really reaching in there and touching them. Yeah. Whether they're looking at them directly or not, or they're looking at some spot off camera, and that's their focal point. They are reaching deep and affecting you. I mean, it's a lot of psychology. Just watching a film in general, you go through a psychological process. There's a chemical process that goes on inside of a viewer as they watch a feature. So it's a huge part of it. There's you know, I was talking to you about before about color. You know,
yeah.
that people have a psychological reaction to color, to sound, to composition. There's composition says very simple things, like, you know, if you have like a medium shot with two people facing each other, it's a very tight shot, you know, there's a framing where, let's say there's a door frame that's oval shaped behind them, and they're kind of framed in between there in the shot. Mm-hmm. You know, it says it's intimate to me in your eye.
I was going to say, I like that. That. I've always liked that image, as opposed to square.
Exactly. So everything in the background is just as important as the actors when it comes to mood and tone and how you're psychologically interpreting the shot, you know, as a viewer, because you're not thinking about it from the technical aspect. You're thinking about it of, I'm enjoying the performance and I'm taking it all in, and I'm perceiving it the way the DP and the director and everybody wanted me to interpret it. And so it's all purposeful going through it.
Now, Alexander, just a couple of minutes ago, you referred to something, and I'm thinking, the information was new to me about a year ago, and my guess is there are a lot of people in the audience who don't understand, and I'm not equipped to explain. But you talked about when you sit down with somebody and they bring you a script and you have a conversation with them about how do you envision this, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we know a feature film or an independent film, but you mentioned several things.
Sure.
So talk about those other things and explain what they are.
As far as subgenres, or as far as...
you mentioned like a web film or...
Yeah, so you have like a web series. Web series is very hot right now.
But what is that?
It's short form. So the episodes are 6 minutes, 10 minutes or less, 5 minutes, 3 minutes in format, and they have their own website specifically for that show.
So like you go to a website to watch a show, and each episode is only a few minutes?
A few minutes.
Oh my gosh!
Because on the internet, people's attention span is much shorter, so you have to work with your audience and see what they're going to respond to. So, a show like The Guild, which is loosely based on World of Warcraft, people that play World of Warcraft, and it's not really mocking them, but it's more like these are, you know, kind of the stereotypical World of Warcraft players, the at-home mom with 2 kids that she's ignoring because she's playing World of Warcraft, or the guy that has no job and is mooching off of his mom's place. She passed away and he's just kind of living there with birds everywhere, and he's playing World of Warcraft. And you have these you know, stereotypical World of Warcraft players that are not necessarily indicative of what the real players are like, but everybody likes it because these characters don't have a personality outside of the computer, and now they're getting together for meetings to talk about their guild, which they get together as a group of people that go on raids and they go attack things or whatever together as a group. So they have a group name for their group, and then they go in, and they think they're the Knights of Good.
So this is all like watching a soap opera or something.
Yeah.
On the internet.
On the internet.
In little clips.
Yeah.
And people are making these as little movies.
Sure, they got that. There's like Darth Chad, which is Darth Vader's brother or cousin or something.
Chad. Is this a good way to start? Like when somebody's starting out in the industry, is the idea of doing a, what did you call it, a web
series?
A web series. Is doing a web series, is that a relatively easy, less expensive way to start out?
If you are going to be shooting with a professional crew, then no. It can be very costly. It could cost upwards of $10,000 an episode for a 6-minute episode if you're working with a professional crew. If you happen to have a bunch of friends that are very professional at what they do, and they're willing to spend the time with you to make these episodes and make the commitment, then you can do it very cheaply. You can just have your own equipment and just do the episodes with professional actors, professional camera, lighting, sound. If you have networked, and then can do these shows on the cheap, where you're just basically feeding everybody.
So let's say that this is something you want to do, and you're going to recruit and get your friends.
Yeah.
What's your financial investment to get the cameras and at least the basic equipment?
It could be, if you have a good web designer on board, a friend of yours, then you can do the website for free and just have to pay for the URL and just.
No, but I mean the cameras, the equipment.
Cameras and equipment can be, you can get yourself a Canon T2i for like $1,000 or less. You can get yourself some lighting kits on eBay or wherever for like $1,000 or less. So it would probably be an investment of about $3,000 to $4,000 for equipment.
So if I understand correctly, somebody who's interested in film with a relatively modest investment and the right networking and everybody interested and professional approach to the project, you could be making the web series, and even if it's not financially lucrative, I would think the enjoyment of exploring the craft has got to be priceless.
Well, if you have, YouTube has overnight stars. So if you have a good product that you're putting out there, you can get millions of fans or hundreds of thousands of hits. And then if you have an official website for the show, you can now get advertisers to come and pay and basically pay to be on your website to advertise their products on your website, and that can be a revenue stream. It could be a very lucrative revenue stream. You have like the Guild. They are now on Zune Video. Now they're exclusively on there on Xbox 360. They're being broadcast on there, and they have a very, very lucrative deal where they only have to do like a total season is under 30 minutes or a little bit more over 30 minutes for worth of episodes, actually total length of the entire season. That's because they're all a couple of minutes apiece.
Well, I'll tell you, Alexander, when you came here tonight, I knew we were going to talk about pre-production of some regular big films. I had no idea. This is like a whole nother world opening up, and I wish we had more time. I would love to talk with you more about it, but I am getting the signal that we're out of time.
I did want to mention quickly that I am currently partnered up with Peter Fox as a producer for his feature.
Yes, I'm going to have Peter on the show next time. I'll have you back. And I'm sorry, we're getting the sign we have to go. I'm so sorry. But I do want to thank you for making the trip and coming here. And I also want to say thank you to my FB crew in the background and to you in the viewing audience. Let me say this. I say it every week, and I mean it sincerely. I do know the value of time. And I thank you for once again sharing an evening with me. We'll see you next time.
Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following: